honored to be here today to discuss something that affects us no matter where we are in our lives: change. Whether we're aware of it or not, change is the constant force that shapes our individual experiences, careers, relationships, and even our societies. It can manifest in countless ways, from minor shifts in our routines to life-altering events, like a career transition, a move to a new place, or a personal loss. But even though change is inevitable, our reactions to it can be surprisingly complex. We often resist it, even though we know that it's necessary for our growth and development. Today, we will delve into the psychology of change, how it affects us, why we resist it, and how we can better manage the challenges it brings. I will also explore how understanding the psychological processes behind our resistance to change can empower us to become more adaptable and resilient in the face of change. So, let's begin with a little science. Over here, we have the model of the brain. And here is the brain stem, or also known as the spinal cord. This serves as a communication channel between the brain and the body for motor and sensory functions. Then we have the cerebellum. This coordinates balance, posture, and muscle movements. This is what keeps us from falling when we walk. Over here, we have the temporal lobe, which is important for hearing and memorization, as well as processing sensorial information. Essentially, this is the part of the brain that helps us visualize the data and information we receive from the world around us. However, just keep in mind that all of this information is relatively new and isn't complete, as there is so much research still going on to understand how the brain fully works. So, what insight does this information give us? From this, we can infer that everything, from the structure of our brains to the thoughts in our minds, is changing eternally. Everything around us is changing. From ecosystems to the very atoms we're made of, there's no escaping it. I have no doubt that we have all experienced change. Perhaps a new job or a school that you moved to, or maybe even more influential change like the death of a loved one. I too have felt the devastation of change. When I was 7, I walked by a TV commercial in which I saw the talented gymnast Nadia Comaneci winning the 1976 Olympics, being the first person to ever receive a perfect score of 10 at just the age of 14. I was mesmerized by how gracious her movements were and aspired to be just like her someday. From that day onwards, I fostered an undying passion for gymnastics. I started training at an academy and hoped to be at her level one day. And although I was lacking experience, I was getting quite good at it too, which led my coach to the decision of choosing me to compete in the international tournament. However, when it was my turn to perform my routine, I was doing a challenging flip on the beam, and while I was landing, I was slightly off balance and I fell. I felt agonizing pain in my ankle, and I struggled to move it. Because of this, I couldn't finish my routine, and I placed second. I was really grateful for that, and honestly, I felt really glad because this was the first step of my journey to become a professional gymnast. However, one thing changed forever that day. The doctor who treated my wound told us that it would be best to stop doing gymnastics completely, as it would endanger me to more such injuries. That broke me. I felt the weight of the world crashing down on me. My dream was over. But what I realized over time is that actually, I'm glad that this happened. Although I'm not a professional gymnast, I still possess the skill which allows me to thrive in other areas of my life, like contemporary dance, for example. I realized that I love to express my feelings through the movement of the body and share those feelings with others, which is why I did gymnastics. Gymnastics didn't define me. The reason why I did it did. And the reason why I'm standing here today is to open your eyes to how change isn't all that bad. It only happens to improve our lives. Change often arises in response to problems and challenges. And navigating through these transitions can strengthen our problem-solving abilities. In the research study of Tennessee Tech University by John Brassford and Barry Stain, it is proved that embracing change can help us turn obstacles into opportunities. Change, whether welcomed or not, impacts us in profound ways. The effects can be emotional, cognitive, or behavioral. Even when change is perceived as positive, it still triggers stress and discomfort due to the disruption of familiar routines and patterns. One of the first ways that change affects us is by creating uncertainty, which the brain processes as a potential threat. Neuroscientific research done in 2011 has shown that uncertainty is processed in similar ways to physical pain. This is because, evolutionarily speaking, uncertainty was a signal of danger. When we face uncertainty, especially in significant life changes, our stress response is triggered. This involves the release of cortisol, the primary stress hormone, which can impair our cognitive functions, particularly decision-making, attention, and memory, proved in a research study by Sapolsky in 2004. We become less able to think clearly, and our judgment may become clouded by our fear or anxiety. In situations when change feels overwhelming, our stress levels can escalate, often causing what we call cognitive overload, a state in which we are simply not able to process all the information at once. Another major psychological effect of change is the way it challenges our sense of self. According to Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, our identity is largely formed through our experiences and relationships with others. When we undergo major life changes, such as changing careers, moving to a new location, or ending a relationship, we are forced to reevaluate who we are, what we value, and how we define ourselves. This process of redefinition can lead to feelings of loss, dubiety, or even sometimes grief. For example, when someone transitions out of a long-held job or moves to a new city, they may feel disconnected from their old identity. They might question, who am I without this job, without this role in my community? This shift in self-concept can create feelings of uncertainty or instability as we rely on our past experiences to define our present selves. However, change doesn't just trigger stress and confusion. It can also open doors to growth. Psychological research by Fredrickson in 2001 has shown that navigating challenging changes can significantly enhance our resilience and overall mental well-being. The process of adapting to new situations can encourage self-reflection and personal development, pushing us to confront and overcome limiting beliefs, fears, and habits. This can ultimately result in greater emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and versatility, all traits of which lead to long-term psychological health. However, as with any journey of growth, this transformation takes time and often requires us to step outside our comfort zones. Initially, change can feel like a setback or a challenge, but over time, it can become an opportunity to develop new strengths and perspectives. Given that change is often difficult and uncomfortable, it's no surprise that we tend to resist it. Resistance to change is not just a reaction to external circumstances, though. It's deeply rooted in our biological wiring and psychology. At the heart of resistance to change is the fear of the unknown. As humans, we are naturally inclined to seek stability and predictability. Psychologists like Daniel Kahneman have discussed how our brains are wired to favor certainty over ambiguity. In fact, we tend to overestimate the dangers of the unknown and underestimate our abilities to cope with those changes. This bias, also known as the ambiguity effect, makes us more likely to avoid unfamiliar situations, even when those situations may lead to positive outcomes. This fear is a survival mechanism. In early human history, the unknown could indeed pose real dangers, so our brains developed to avoid that risk. Today, even though many of these risks are not life-threatening, our psychological mechanisms still treat uncertainty as a threat, triggering anxiety and resistance. Another reason why we resist change is because we value comfort. Routine provides us with a sense of control, predictability, and mastery over our environment. Research on habit formation and behavior by Elliott and Murayama in 2008 suggests that once we have established a routine, it becomes cognitive shorthand, an easy way for us to save our mental energy. This sense of automaticity helps us to save mental resources and navigate daily life much more efficiently. Disrupting this routine, especially if it feels forced or unnecessary, can feel like a threat to our psychological stability. The energy required to break out of these old habits or readjust to new environments can be overwhelming, and often we resist change just because it's too exhausting or unfamiliar. Human beings have an inherent need for control, as it provides us with a sense of safety and competence. When change is imposed upon us, we often feel disempowered. Whether it's a job restructuring, health scare, or a breakup, the perception of being out of control leads to increased stress, anxiety, and resistance. According to learned helplessness theorem, developed by Seligman in 1975, when we feel that we cannot influence the outcomes of our environment, we feel as if we have a diminished sense of self-efficacy. And this can make us more likely to avoid change altogether. For example, in situations where change is thrusted upon us, such as layoffs or forced relocations or other external disruptions, we might react by denying or resisting the change because it feels like an assault on our autonomy. One of the more subtle reasons, though, why we resist change is because of cognitive dissonance. Developed by Leon Festinger in 1957, cognitive dissonance theory explains how we experience psychological discomfort when we hold two contradictory beliefs or behaviors. For example, we may intellectually acknowledge that a change is needed, for example, adopting a healthier lifestyle, but emotionally resist it because it conflicts with our current habits or desires, like enjoying unhealthy foods. This internal conflict, the tension between the shoulds and the wants, often leads us to procrastinate, rationalize, or outright avoid the change. This resistance can make even small changes feel like monumental obstacles. Despite the inherent discomfort of change, it is possible to shift our mindset and approach it with greater flexibility and resilience. Embracing change, while not always easy, is essential for personal growth and long-term success. One of the most powerful ways to overcome resistance to change is through a growth mindset. Carol Dweck's research on the growth mindset has demonstrated that individuals who view challenges and obstacles as opportunities for learning and growth are far more likely to embrace new experiences and persist through difficulties. By reframing change as an opportunity to learn rather than a threat to our identity, we can reduce the fear associated with it. A growth mindset encourages us to see change as a path to mastery and personal development, not a loss of control or ability. Another key to embracing change is developing greater self-awareness and emotional intelligence. Self-awareness is what helps us to understand our emotional reactions to change, while emotional intelligence helps us regulate those reactions, as mentioned by psychologist Goleman in 1995. Mindfulness practices, journaling, and therapy are all excellent tools for developing emotional awareness, helping us manage the stress and discomfort change often brings. By recognizing our fears and anxieties about change, we can begin to separate our emotions from our rational thought, reduce feeling, enabling us to make clearer, more intentional decisions. Research by Cohen and Wills in 1985 has shown that social support also plays a critical role in successfully navigating change. Whether it's a trusted friend, family member, or professional counselor, having someone to talk to can significantly reduce the emotional burden of change. By sharing our concerns with others, we gain perspective, reduce feelings of isolation, and receive encouragement or practical advice. Rather than trying to tackle large changes all at once, breaking the process into smaller, manageable steps can reduce feelings of overwhelm and increase our sense of control. Bandura's theory of self-efficacy suggests that accomplishing small tasks builds confidence and creates a sense of mastery, which makes it easier for us to tackle larger challenges over time. Lastly, resilience is a crucial part of embracing change. Resilience doesn't mean avoiding stress or hardship, contrary to popular belief. It means learning how to adapt to and bounce back from adversity. By practicing positive thinking, reframing setbacks as opportunities, and learning from past experience, we can become more psychologically robust in the face of change. Overall, change is a natural, inevitable part of life. But it is also a deeply psychological experience. It triggers stress, fear, and uncertainty, all of which can lead us to resist it. But understanding the psychological processes behind change and the reason why we resist it can allow us to better manage our reactions and embrace change more effectively. Instead of fearing change, we can begin to see it as a vital part of our growth. By developing a growth mindset, building self-awareness, relying on social support, and taking small, intentional steps can transform our relationship with change. Ultimately, embracing change helps us become more adaptable, more resilient, and more equipped to thrive in an ever-revolving world. Thank you.